Our first speaker is Özge Ertem, who holds a bachelor's degree in political science and international relations from Marmara University. She has an MA from Ataturk Institute of Modern Turkish History at Boğaziçi University. She has completed her PhD at the European University Institute in Florence. This woman gets around. Her PhD study has focused on social and political and cultural history of two famines which occurred in the 1870s on the territory of Anatolia. And between she has also worked as director at the Koç University Anomet Library, where she is an editor as well, and was a postdoc at Harvard University's Middle East Studies Research Center recently. Özge will speak today from Kadıköy to the villages of Van, famine in Van, and the Central Relief Committee 1880 to 1885. Özge.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored. And Türkçe konuşacağım.
I'll be speaking in Turkish. So, Hrant Dink's meetings have always been really transformative for me. And this is yet another such meeting. From the beginning, I'd like to thank all the organizers, our interpreters, and everyone who have made this possible. Now, I'd like to start with a quotation. One of the most significant writers from the 19th century Armenian literature, Hagop Baronyan, writes about the life in Istanbul districts and talks about three important people from Kadıköy. He talks about Kadıköy, right? He says, Serope Gülbenkian, Apik Uncuyan, Şaşyan Boğaz Efendis, who live in Kadıköy, and other three members of the committee worked day and night and were unforgettable. But they did not buy even 5 of our book, Askayın Çoçer. So, now that we have such patriots, we wouldn't even care if the famine went on for 40 years. He was right, actually. Because these members of the committee, during the 1880 famine, just like he says, day and night, they keep working, round the clock. And this famine he's talking about is triggered by the draft after the Ottoman-Russian War, and many people starved to death in the year 1880. This is the famine he's talking about in Erzurum, Diyarbakır, and particularly in Van. And with the report that they have written, we are able to learn more about this famine. And here's what we see. 108 meetings in the first year of the famine last about 900 hours. And there are meetings which take about 28 hours even. So when the aggravation of the famine fades in 1881, the second year they hold 71 meetings. It's twice a week in the winter and during the fall. But then they start meeting again once a week, and these last about 423 hours. Usually they meet in the evenings at the house of Apik Uncuyan, and this becomes the bureau of the Central Committee. And until August 1884, the number of letters they receive is 3,340. Now, why give so many details? Of course, details are our business, but why do I tell you all the details? It's because of the meticulous way of work, the vigilant way of work of the commission. Look how meticulous they were in the way they wrote down the report. Thanks to all these fine details, we can today have an idea about the solutions people try to bring up to the famine problem from the Armenian society perspective, although it's from the rich Armenians perspective and from the Kadıköy elite perspective, still it gives an idea. For the first time, it is a good resource which gives us a full-fledged idea. Now I'll tell you a little bit about the background information. I have come across this report of the Commission during my PhD thesis. But actually, I did not have access to the report back then. But then, only last year, I found out that this was to be found in the Atatürk Library. It wasn't accessible before. Then my friend who teaches Armenian language and literature, Mehmet Fatih Uslu, I asked him about it, and he referred me to one person who's working next door someplace, Sevan Değirmenciyan. I met her. I was in Boston back then, so we did long hours of Skype with her, and we could see the report. I'd like to thank her very much for helping me out with the translation, by the way. So as I said, report gives us an idea of the famine and what has happened to the Kadıköy Armenians, and it gives you, this serves like a manual that tells you what was done every single day for livestock, for humans, how this has influenced them and what they have done. And in terms of the living spaces or habitats, what were the solutions that people thought of? The accounts, minutes of the meeting, what works, what doesn't, are all delivered in a self-critical way. And there's particular emphasis on accountability and transparency. So it's also a good resource that shows how a corporate memory can be created. So once again, how a report should be written, and in terms of archives, what should be taken into account, are the things that we learn from this report, so that you do not have to start from scratch each time a famine hits. So drought is the trigger of the famine, but it starts from the Pakrevant, which is around Muş, where bread is the most abundant actually, and Bayezid Sancak is right in the middle of the war, and because the Russian and the Ottoman soldiers pass by the region, and because of mobilization, there are not even seeds left in the warehouses. So the war of 1877 and 78 hinders the harvest, and then drought follows. So report says that year almost no crops were produced. Then in September 1879, the first impacts of famine can be seen. Just like in the famine that has hit central Anatolia in 1875, again a harsh winter follows, so the foods even are further non-existent, and there is no communication because of heavy snow between the cities, and starvation starts. People who have grains in their warehouses ask for huge figures to give their grains, and people start starving. And epidemics start first of all on animals, and it is the animals that die first of all, and people get ill because they eat food that is not natural. We spoke about it yesterday regarding tribes. One is not a war region like Bayezid, but it is on the crossroads of the Kurdish groups that go to war. So one important thing there is that those tribes also have lost their livestock, so they themselves are also dealing with starvation. Consul General of Britain, Clayton, writes a report where he says 98% of those who starved to death were Kurds actually. So this shows that famine has hit first the Kurds, then Armenians, then also Turks. It is a common calamity which has hit all these peoples. Sheikh Ubeydullah rebellion in Anatolia, in Van, takes place, so they cannot harvest the crops that they have, and what there is devastated, and then a fire follows. The famine starts in Başkale, as we know today, Alpag Sancak, and then moves to Norduz, Şatah, and Moks Sancak very heavily. Starting with the month of October of 1879, from all these regions there are help demands to central Van. So on the November 24th, the Hrimyan establishes a local commission in order to collect aid. And he is the person also writing to the Patriarchate. The bishop, Hrimyan, collects this aid, and he is one of the biggest organizers of the aid collection system. But the city center also fails in meeting the great need, and starting with March 1880, famine and poverty scenes are really, really grave. And the letters sent from the Van Commission to the Patriarchate also present this. One letter says the following: an old grandma came to us with shabby clothes, and she had just some root to eat for the next 4 to 5 days. The 1-year-old child was only like a bag of bones, and he was barely able to breathe. The mother of the child had died on the way, and the child had asked for milk. The child was asking to be breastfed from the father, and the father was asking for bread from the commission. A 60-year-old Assyrian mother had brought her single 25-year-old child to the commission, but he died on the body of his mother. So, typhoid fever was a big problem back then. According to Van Commission, the number of people who die because of famine is 2,000. It's not a very clear figure, but the people who were affected by the famine in Alpagan and Van are probably about 60,000. And the majority of the people who suffer from famine are from Alpag and the surroundings. So when we look at the pictures back then, a family going on to Van loses their child. A 9-year-old child is found by the commission on the streets of Van and is taken to the Sanasaryan school at Garin. So there are many sad stories as such. With all these locations, when you think about this Sanasaryan school, etc., when we look at the collective consciousness, collective memory, it also means something else. So about the collective memory which was lost, the commission report makes annotations to what has been lost. This is why it's also important. Then there are many details about the people, the children who became orphans. So in the Van Central Commission and all the other commissions, they deal with orphanages. So for quite some time now, all these news come from Van to the Patriarchate and to the government. And Hrimyan already starts declaring this, announcing this. Even before the Ottoman government establishes their famine commission, even way before that. But still this Ottoman commission works hand in hand with the Armenian commission. But the Armenian commission is established actually earlier. The Ottoman government commission is established in April 1880, but for the Armenian commission was established in January 1880. The commission members for the first time meet in Kadıköy at the family Gulbenkian's home on January 6, 1880. And the commission established by Patriarch Nerses Varyabedyan resigns, and the voluntary commission members come, so they're really happy. And as stated in the report, Varyabedyan says this is a blessing of God, or God must have something to do with this. It's a commission comprising of 8 members, so it starts its efforts with the name Central Relief Committee in January 18th, 1880. So the president is Gulbenkian, the vice president is Gazarosyan, the first scribe is Shashyan, second scribe is Noradukyan, the first auditor is Uncuyan. The second auditor is Nigotimosyan, Krikor Efendi Nigotimosyan. Treasurer, Aper Efendi Gülbenkian. And accounts auditor, Karnik Efendi Hovagimyan. The main duties of the commission are as follows: collecting aid, reaching the aid to the necessary places, and and overseeing its distribution. Sometimes the patriarch also participates in the commission meetings and presides these meetings. And the commission in the report thanks the government, the patriarchy, and the goodwill of the Armenian people, and that says that many people were saved thanks to the efforts of the commission. It's important to say that the commission did not see famine as a short-term crisis incident, but as a solution which requires longer-term policy making. So every step regarding agricultural training and every step that was taken about orphanages after the famine are provided in details in the report. And the Commission says they abided by the following principles. 1. Without making any discrimination, distributing the help to everyone. And 2. If Commission deems appropriate, then money can also be collected and it can be distributed. So in the Commission there are members from different sects. There are Catholic and Protestant Armenian members as well, like Boğaz Shashyan was Catholic Armenian. And in the first pages of the Commission report, it says the following: our Commission is made up of Armenians. This is why we received only help from Armenians and on behalf of Armenians. So we were obliged to only help the Armenians. Only if we had anything extra, then we could help others, like Assyrians, Chaldeans, Turkish and Kurdish Muslims, and Yazidis as well. And yes, in Alashkert and Pasen, Catholics and Protestants in Van, Nestorians and Kurds in Siirt, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Tajikis in Mardin, Catholics, Chaldeans, Arabs in Diyarbakir, Anatolian Greeks, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Muslims, and Jews, and in Bitlis, Tajikis, and Protestants, and in Mosul, Assyrians. They also received help. So what does this commission do? As I said, they work hand in hand with the Ottoman government, and they also make statistical research about agricultural protection. In Van, in Surtnishan Monastery, they open a school of agriculture and make sure that the monastery's vast land is turned into a model ranch where students could learn about agriculture and which could serve as a training model for other regions. This school is opened in November 1880 and functions until 1883. They bring potatoes from Marseille, for example, and send it to Erzurum or other places. They write many books about agriculture development. Kevork Efendi Stimaracyan writes a book on how to plant potatoes or how to plant poppy seeds in Armenian and in Turkish, by the way. And Dr. Hagop Efendi Amasyan Dr. Istepan Efendi Hagopian writes an index on health as well. So they say, they talk about a more public health perspective. So this is like the 19th century equivalent of that perspective. Well, before I finalize, one more point. At the end of 1882, when famine is solved, there's still money in the budget of the commission. So they want to do something which is like a legacy for the Armenian people. So 7,360 liras is sent on training issues, and they buy the big Commerce Han in 1883, which is across Istanbul Valide Han. And it is talking about this Büyük Ticarethan that says this is a personified version of the stories and collective memory, because there's a lot of money they cannot get back. So they say the vouchers which are not yet taken back, even if the money is not paid, still Ticarethan property is to stay and it should be permanent. So there's not much left about the people who suffered from famine, but Ticarethan is a property which is long lasting, and and the story of that property can be found in the Hrant Dink website, which is Karagözyan Orphanage, and annexed to that building. It has been confiscated later on. So this Büyük Ticarethan is transferred to the ownership of the treasury. And again, as far as I could find out about the Hrant Dink Foundation's website, it's later on sold out, and now this belongs to a private person. And in conclusion, similarly, Apik Unjiyan's house in Kadıköy, where the commission members got together, is the personified version of this whole legacy. But then, as we keep saying yesterday, this is amongst ruins. Thank you.